Hey, what's up, everybody? We're here with my good friend Aaron Leese from Stagecraft Software, and we haven't done a tutorial video or a talk through in a very long time.
Yeah, buddy, you're too busy.
Yeah, I am very busy. I got to make more time for these. So Aaron just came to me a few weeks ago, and he said that he was starting to work with Figma and JUCE, and thought that it might be great for people who are just getting started with building UIs and looking at how to get a UI from Figma to JUCE. And so I thought that we could do a video together just to talk about this. So the title of this video, I guess, would be something like how to get started with Figma and building UIs in JUCE. So yeah, over to you, Aaron. How do we get
Sounds
started?
about right. Sounds about right. Yeah, well, we're gonna do it with a few different things here, but the thing that happened was a few weeks ago there was a client had me looking at something on Figma, and I should say right away I'm not like a Figma expert, by the way, but I've been doing I'm a juice expert and been doing this for a long time, and I like to do vector-based UIs. So when I saw Figma, I was like, oh, okay, this is like what the cool kids are using nowadays to design knobs and UIs and buttons and layouts and all the different things. And I wanted to play around with it and see what I could do to get it in juice. And I hopped on the forum and I didn't see a lot, didn't see a lot of posts, didn't see a lot of examples. So it took a little working around some of the limitations of juice, which is part of what we'll talk about today. But I got a good system. I figured out how to get it all working together in a pretty robust and I'd say pretty easy, quick fashion. So I'm kind of excited to just like walk you through it, and make hopefully we can make this just as clear as possible because it is really for the person who's just like you got a plugin built and you're looking at the knobs and you're like, oh, this is just using the like juice basic look and feel class and I want to do something better. And so you're stepping through like, well, how do I do that? Do I use images or image strips or SVGs? We can talk about the sort of relative, like which ones of those have relative advantages in which ways. But what we're sticking with today is SVGs into Juice, and I'm going to show you that you can get a pretty versatile UI that way. You use a few different overlapping SVGs. You use a few different tricks to like change the lighting and stuff like that, like the way the shines, things like that work. So yeah, we'll take a look and just kind of walk through how all that stuff works.
Yeah,
Sound right?
this sounds like a lot of fun. So, actually, within our agency, that is the way that we mostly do UIs now is with Figma and then
Ah,
implementing those in Juice. We actually have been switching more to the web tech because Figma is web tech, right? So it
yeah.
just makes sense that it would go into HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But I believe that we've actually done those to C++ UIs now, but that is a way that it's a trend that I've seen people switching to is using.
Yeah, totally. There was, I mean, in like the bigger trend, it is there was a guy at ADC, what was this, like 6 or 7 years ago, who had done a survey and gone out there, done some research. It was part of a research firm in Memphis, as I recall, and had looked at a bunch of UIs and figured out how many were skeuomorphic, meaning like they look like hardware, right? Like, seen the ones that it's like it looks like it's even got the little the nuts and the bolts are like built in there to make it look like it's like cloned to hardware versus like the newer kind of, yeah, we're gonna draw lines and make it very minimal and everything else. And at the time, he had said that they'd been looking at it for years and they'd gone back and looked at some old stuff and there was like a big shift. Like people were starting to do more of the non-skeuomorphic, so the vector-based stuff. And SVGs kind of lend themselves to that sort of thing. Like if you want like a brushed aluminum look, you're not going to get that with SVGs.
Mm-hmm, hmm. Why not?
Because I mean, that's sort of like granularity. Like if you want the textures and stuff, you're going to need images to some degree. Like you're not going to want to sit there. So an SVG, so it stands for scalable vector graphic, right? As we'll see here in a minute, like it's basically just an XML file that's explaining how to draw something. So it explains like, go to point 5/6 down, draw a line, make the line blue, right? So you can imagine if you were trying to do that again, we'll go just back to brushed aluminum where it's like, yeah, we have this gray and there's like this texture on it. What are you going to do? Like 200 of these little lines and then fade them in and out. You could maybe make that happen, but it's just not the most efficient way.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And like you were saying, SVG is really a set of instructions, right? So you could actually open an SVG as a text file and see what the data is.
What? That's what we're going to do, in fact.
Oh, amazing. I'm fast forwarding already. So yeah, if you want to share your screen, maybe you can give us an
Yeah.
what type of project we're looking at today.
Okay, so we are looking at reskinning a knob. This is Figma, the website, and I just over the last week and a half, created a bunch of these little things. As a quick intro, we'll get into it more, but Figma is here. If I click on this one, which one's that? Knob one. Get into the knob, and it's just like here's the thumbnail. It's a polygon, and there's a couple of, I guess it's just one in there, one circle under it, and then we set the shading and all that sort of stuff. So we'll look a little bit more at that. But that's where again, I'm not necessarily the Figma expert. And then over here we have Ableton running a plugin, C++ UI, and here's a knob that we're going to look at reskinning, right?
Okay.
And this is basically the final result. So we're going to jump back in a minute and kind of go back to like using these more remedial things and take a look and like experiment our way towards this. The final product I like because of the reactive elements in it. I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So first of all, you notice when it's turned all the way down, the color here is different than it goes all the way up. Now we have a fade and it's a brighter color in the middle, right? There's
Right.
a shine around the edge, and if you look carefully, you'll notice that parts of that will change as the knob rotates as well. Like the lighting is changing a little bit. In this case, we have some light, illusion of light coming from the what do you call this? Thumb, I guess. So there's a little bit of brightness that follows that, but there's also this shine on top of the knob that doesn't follow that. And if we move this around, you'll notice the shine starts to move as if there's a light kind of in the top middle of the screen, right? The color changes slightly as we move. And additionally, this UI in particular, we can change the color programmatically. And in this case, the SVGs will follow it, right? So stuff that's a little harder to do with images. That's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about when I say I want like kind of a reactive UI that can follow different things. There, let's get to a nice color. Follow different things in the program and can be changed on the fly, right?
Right.
Okay.
I've never actually seen that. A UI that changes its shading depending on where it is on the screen. That's very
Yeah, a lot of guys will do like if you're doing image strips and images, you can do custom images so every knob can be slightly different. So when you see those like 3D renderings, if you see a plugin where like this knob is kind of coming out this way and this one's coming out this way, those are usually using image strips and using sprites or splines, they call them a lot of times. So use an image strip. There's nothing wrong with doing it that way, but it just means that anytime you want to change like the color, for example, you got to re-render all the images, right? So there's advantages to that because it can look really, really slick, but it can't be quite as versatile, quite as responsive, which is the thing that I don't like. This one also has here. I'll do it here. Yeah. We have automation attached to these, so the what do we call it? The fill in there, this blue part, and then the green part is being rendered programmatically, right? And it's interacting in this way with the SVGs. So you could do something like that with an image. You could imagine where you have an image strip, but then on top of it, you're going to draw something. But it's difficult. That's difficult. That's where I think SVGs start to kind of lend themselves to this.
Hmm.
So, all right, there's that. So here now I'm going to just walk you through the process real quick at the like kind of top level, and then we'll go down and look at the code or look at how certain things are done. Yeah, let's do this. We'll grab the simplest one, knob test one. And here we are in Figma, looking at this knob. Figma makes it very convenient to copy paste as an image or SVG. So I'm going to copy SVG. And then on my desktop, I have these 4 files. They're just text.svg, nothing special about these files. Which one was that? That was the knob. So we're going to put that in here, and I'm going to just zero out the rest. Save, 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 save. And then over here, I got a handy dandy little reload button. So I hit reload. It checked my desktop. It looked at those files. It quickly grabbed what it needed out of those files, and it rendered. This looks slightly different. You'll notice there's this Uh, yeah, you can see the color change behind it. So I'm actually drawing this circle. That's why you don't see the circle over here. Come on. You don't see the circle, but this is semi-transparent, right? So this circle is drawn behind it. So this is giving us the first example of how it can be a little reactive, right? I have a semi-transparent SVG, and as I turn the knob up, I'm drawing a circle behind it that gets brighter,
Mhm.
right? We're going to find kind of more creative ways to use this as we move a little further.
Now, can I ask you a crazy question?
Please, I love crazy questions.
This may be a little bit, what's the word, pedantic, but could you just show me how to actually draw the most simple knob? So you have a couple designs that you've made there in Figma, but for somebody
Oh,
like
you mean
myself who would just be starting, and I say,
how to
I don't
draw it in Figma? You mean?
even, right.
Yeah. Sure. Let me move this over. And again, I am not the Figma expert, but I think I can handle that. So here is a circle tool.
Yep.
Here's a lot of your drawing tools, right? Rectangle, line, arrow, etc. So let's just make, I'm going to make this one, or we're going to make one similar to it, right? So here we're going to draw an ellipse, set the color. Let's make this one fully transparent.
Yep.
And in this case, so I kind of like this about Figma. It allows you to add additional. So stroke is, there we go. It turned to black. Ah, see the black line on the outside?
Yep.
Stroke is on the outside, and then fill is what's on the inside. But we can add additional fills. So I'm going to add a second fill. In this case, it's a semi-transparent black. So you saw it get darker. Let's change this. Here's our gradients. Radial gradient. And here it's going from semi-transparent black to black. But let's just change this color. Make this like white. And I'm going to do this. Change it up. Make the white 100% so that it shows up.
For a person who
This
says that you're just starting with Figma, you're
is all I know how to do, buddy. Don't ask me too much more. 100% bright F. It's not all that bright though, is it? I don't know why. Let's just make it a little bigger. There you go. Oh, because this is on top of it. No, that's 100%. Turn it off, turn it on.
yeah. Just
Yeah.
I think that's good there. Just
Oh,
the basic, just
here's why.
like, okay, well, here's a starting point.
There's our 100%. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But here's our starting point. You can play with the transparencies of the layers and things like that. Now you'll notice there's something interesting here. There's like effects down here that you can use. You can also get a little more crazy with some of these other things. Put an image in there, all this kind of stuff. Turn that off. Um, a lot of that won't work. I mean, this is what I came to realize when I started doing this was, so for example, the effects has a nice drop shadow or internal shadow, something like that.
Mhm.
So you get this nice shading around the edge. And I thought, great, that looks wonderful. Exported it, brought it in, and JUCE doesn't read that, right? So JUCE doesn't implement everything that an SVG can put in there, right? It's a pretty expansive list. They implement a lot of it,
I think
and
that's
they implement enough. They implement the gradients. So what you can end up doing, and what we will end up doing down here, is drawing our own kind of drop shadows and internal shadows, right? Just with gradients,
uh,
because it will use the gradients. It just won't use these effects.
yeah. SVG, I think, has different versions. I'm not sure which version would be the juice compatible.
Yeah, well, and I saw on the forum they just don't implement everything that's in the whichever version they even use,
Mm.
right? Which is often how it happens. Like there's just too much, and then not all of it's even relevant or necessary or whatever else. But here, let's take a look at this knob. Copy as SVG. I'll put that in my knob. Hit reload. There it is.
Nice.
Right?
So now can you show me the C++ code that
Yeah.
you've
Um, so, so in my case, I'm only doing it when it's in debug here, but this is just creating the button. Okay. When I click the button, it does this refresh SVGs. This is a large, all we're going to be concerned with is these two, right? So this is all my code for the knob, like, automating look and feel change, skew factors, etc. So we don't need to be concerned about all of that. Um, but whatever component you are dealing with, you would need something like this, where in my case, this code refreshes, rereads the SVGs so that I can just hit this reload button and we can quickly get what we pulled from Figma and just refresh it and get it to work. And then this does the actual drawing, right?
Mhm.
So uses these SVGs, which have been, it's called image. It's not, it's drawables, which is what, when you load an SVG, you load it into a drawable. Um, but it uses, in this case, 4 layers worth of images. And
Yeah.
each one's got a little bit of difference. We have to rescale them. For example, this knob can be any size, so I could do a small knob. So it has to just know to rescale the SVG, and it's right there in the name, right? SVG, scalable vector graphic. So the whole point of this is you draw it, and because it's a set of rules, it never gets pixelated like an image. You can blow it up as big or as small as you want, and it's gonna know how to draw it. It's gonna draw it the same way. Make
Mhm.
sense?
So yeah, so going back just for people that are starting, as so you're loading an SVG as a drawable. Uh,
And we'll get to that. Where that's in here. Refresh SVGs, right? So all we're doing in my case, I'll go through this quickly, and then you can ask questions if there's stuff we should follow up on. In my case, I just tell it when I hit this button, go to my desktop, SVG directory. If that directory exists, look in there for these files. If you find files called knob track, knob highlights, rotating, then load them and stack them into this stack of drawables that I have living in this class.
right. Yeah.
The actual part where yeah. So it reads it, like I said, as XML. SVG is just XML, basically. Um, Here's the file. If the file exists, check if it's empty or not. That's how if they're empty, we skip them. And then if it's not empty, we make an XML document, and then we take that and load it. So we're just loading the string basically. So I'm going to load this as a string, SVG. Uh, this is just a stack of strings, same idea, that lives in the class. And then secondarily, I go through each of the strings. I load them. I make a change, which we'll talk about in a second. And then right here, drawable create from SVG, right? So
Yeah.
this is the JUCE helper function. This is really all you need is the create from SVG. So you have Figma, you're copying and pasting, you have a button somewhere that's going to load stuff, and you just have text files. And whatever text is in that file, you got to load it, and then you got to do this create from SVG with a XML document.
Okay. Just to go back to the beginning again.
Hmm.
So you have your SVG files that you have copied. So you've copied the SVG, what would you call it? String,
Code. Yeah,
um,
string, whatever.
that you've now pasted into the SVG file. You then do a file loading of the
Yep.
SVG or SVGs, right?
Hmm.
Load them into a string vector,
Yep.
right? Or load them into an XML.
So you can go straight to just load it as an XML document and hand that to this function,
Yep.
right? The reason I do it is because I go through this and I do a quick string replacement. Okay. This
Right.
is the next thing that we need to talk about. That's how I get the colors to change. So this is blue. You notice that here we made it and it was white,
Mhm.
and here it's blue, right? And we saw before if we change the colors of the UI, this will change as well. The reason that works is because we are going through the SVG and replacing anywhere we find a color string. The hex color string. Oh, well, we also do it if it says white. Here's a hex color string, right? So you've seen these if you've done any web programming. This is just red, green, blue, done as hexadecimal,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
Uh, Anytime. So what I tell it to do is if you find any of these that are grayscale, replace that gray with the whatever the active color is for this UI, right?
Mhm.
So I'm telling my UI, I want to do shades of blue. So it knows, okay, we're using blue. So when it sees a grayscale, it just takes blue and it scales the brightness up to be the relative grayscale version of that. So if it's, dark gray is going to be dark blue and light gray is going to be light blue.
Right. So the first step, just to go back for beginners, is
Yep.
that you have your SVG files. You've copied the code into the SVG file loaded as a text file, right?
Mhm.
Then you've used the file loader to load those to rescan the files,
Yep.
load those into an XML document, then take the strings of those and then create an SVG from the string, right?
Yes. And again, you can skip the string step if you're not recoloring. So all you really need to do is this could just be XML document and then, load from the file
Mm,
on desktop
right,
and then drawable, create from SVG because this wants an XML element, right? So all you really need to do is load the file and create from SVG, and you'll be fine. The
right,
only reason I pull it out and get the string is so I can recolor it.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, that all makes sense. Yeah.
Good. Cool. With me so far. I like it. All right. So let's talk about some creative uses of SVGs. Now that we've got them in there, I mentioned before that the knobs are layers of four different SVGs, right? And we saw them earlier, like moving around and all that kind of stuff. Like, what are we actually doing with that? Each of the four layers behaves slightly differently, and they all have this transparency. So they all can interact in different ways with the background or with what I'm going to draw programmatically, right? The fill in this case. This code is fairly similar, fairly boilerplate to what you would see in the look and feel class for drawing a knob, right? We're not going to go too in depth with, affine transforms and all that kind of stuff. But the point is that, like, if you're using an image or an SVG or whatever else, when you're drawing a knob, you're going to want it to rotate. So you take your image or you take your SVG and you're going to rotate it, right? So that's the first thing that we're going to look at. This is the track. So down here is right here. Draw the knob itself. We're currently skipping a lot of the other stuff because there is no track. There are no highlights yet. We're just drawing the knob itself. Draw knob itself. If the image exists, go in and we're going to do something. Well, well, we don't see it now because this is not transparent, but you remember I had a glow behind it.
Mhm.
That's where we're doing set color, fill ellipse. So the first thing I do is draw a, a little thing behind here, which if we had a little transparent piece, we would see. In fact, we could add that real quick if you want. Here, show you something else yeah, watch this. Do another little ellipse just near the middle. And then you can do subtract. What are these all called? Bezier functions? No, that's not it. There's a special word for these functions, but there, we subtracted, we put a hole in it. So we have a transparent hole in the middle of our knob. Now I'm going to grab that code, put it in here, save, reload. There we go. So we see we have this transparent hole, and you notice it's kind of dark blue. When I turn it up, it goes bright blue,
Mhm.
right? So we can use that. We could put a hole that was right here that was rotating around, and we would see the color of this, call it a thumbnail, change as we moved it,
Mhm.
right? Nice reactive stuff. So here's where we're drawing that ellipse. Here's where we're rotating the knob. Basically, we've, again, not going to go into it, but calculated an angle based on the value of the knob, and then we tell it, okay, rotate the image, the SVG, based on that, this transform, based on this rotation.
Mm. Can you go into it? I think that's a key part that
Oh boy, how long you want this video to be?
um, I mean, just the basics.
Yeah. Affine transforms are matrix transforms based on so rotate, rescale, shear, and translate, move around. These can be used a lot. You can end up using these a lot um, if you're doing vector-based UIs. So here, for example, right? This is not what we're getting into, but this thing in the middle does this cool, wow, what's it doing there, right?
Mhm.
Probably what it's doing is drawing a bunch of points on an image and then doing an affine transform where it rescales those points. And there's some rotation. Oh yeah, there we go. So it's rotating and it's moving like anything that's, that original Winamp, if you can remember the visualizer for Winamp, if you're old enough. Or anytime you're doing an oscilloscope or an FFT where we have all these uh, peaks, right? And
Right.
we want it to maybe fade out or move or, anything else. Anytime you're doing that kind of image drawing where you're doing it from scratch, using vectors, using the code, affine transforms are going to be your friend because that is what allows you to quickly take images, take graphics, take SVGs, and make them bigger, make them smaller, make them rotate, all that fun stuff.
Hmm. So
Cool.
show us how you've got the knob to rotate.
So the knob, when it loads, it looks like this, straight up and down, right? Which is here.
Yep.
And what we do is we say, okay, we have calculated an angle. The knob is at 25%. Because the knob's at 25%, you need such and such an angle, right? In radians, starting from, I believe it's starting from straight up, 2 pi, a clockwise rotation. So we know the angle we want to rotate it to. Rotation also has a pivot point. Most of these affine transforms have a pivot point. So here's you can imagine a rectangle, and we just say we want to rotate it, and we want the pivot point to be the center of the rectangle, right?
Yep.
That's all it is.
Okay.
Knob images
Start.
set transform. This is a drawable. No, it's a component thing. Oh, yeah, but drawables are components. So any component in JUCE at any time, you can set a transform for it. And then whenever you draw the item, the component, it will draw with that transform in mind.
Mhm.
It'll apply that transform when it draws it. This is how you draw, for example, text that's, straight up and down or at a 45-degree angle or something like that
Right. Can you
as
show
well.
them where start angle and end angle come into this? How you get it to show where the
Like
knob,
how we
how
how
you
we calculate this angle
no, how you get the dial to show, because the dial is going to start at about um what was it? So
down here.
yeah, so it's going to start
Yeah,
there.
yeah. Okay, yeah. So our angle is constrained. This is actually, I'm not sure if I've changed this or if this comes straight out of the JUCE. You will see all this very similar code if you look at the JUCE look and feel default knob drawing
Yeah.
routine, whatever. I'd have to look and see what it's called exactly, but um, yeah. So rotary start angle, rotary end angle. In my case, I want to do what am I doing? Pi plus pi over 4
Yeah.
starts there. Yeah. So that's starting from this is 0. Pi is half the circle.
Right.
And then another quarter of pi gets me down to about here. So
Mm.
that's my start angle.
Great.
My end angle is the start angle plus 6 over 4, 3 over 2 pi. 3/2 of pi. Yeah, exactly. So 1.5 pi. So if you can imagine starting here, 1 pi, a circle is 2 pi radians, right? So 1 pi is to here,
Yep.
and another half pi gets you down to here.
Yep.
So I have just told it my start angle is about here, my end angle is about here. And then I just interpolate between the two. I figure out, hey, what's the value of the knob currently, the MIDI parameter the parameter that I'm using for the value in this knob.
Mm.
And then, what does that mean for my final angle? Means take my start, and then as a percentage, the difference from end to start. Right?
Got it. Okay.
Cool. So that's how we rotate. Um, so there we go. Got our knob and we got it rotating, right? Now, what shall we do next? Might be nice to have a track around the outside of the knob. So let's take a look at that. I'll go back to Figma. I'm not going to build this one from scratch. We're just going to pick one, right? Knob track, there it is. Copy SVG. And this one's called knob track. Save, reload. There it is. Okay, some notes about this track. If we look at it in Figma, it's this one especially is nothing special. A little bit of a fade, a little bit of a gradient we can see there, but mostly it's just a container, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is interesting about this from the C++ side, we'll go up and look at it. Here's our track. Is that we're gonna do a clip region. So I'm gonna draw a slice of pie, basically. That's what they call it, but the an arc, right? Using the same math that we just used, where we figure out, here's our starting angle, here's our end angle, draw an arc from the starting angle to the end angle, right? And fill it with some color. The ends of it here are rounded, and the way we manage that is by using a clip region, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the nice things you can do with SVGs is, where is it? Track path. Oh, am I wrong? No, there it is. Get outline as path. Uh, we will take this SVG object, and once it's loaded into JUCE, you can say, hey, I want to know what the outline is. Can you give me that as a path? And JUCE will crunch the numbers and give you a nice path that corresponds to the outline of whatever your SVG is.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, we're simply going to use that to rescale it to be the right size. So there's a little bit of extra math there that I don't want to go into unless you do. But then we will use that to reduce the clip region, which is where we're like allowed to draw, basically, on the graphic. So now when I fill that arc, it will be constrained by this track,
Yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So we could do, here's a smaller one. Not 3, track. If we're going to do the smaller one, oop, track. Yeah, there you go. It just got thinner, right?
Right.
So we can effectively draw inside of this track. If I have beveled edges that are transparent or have a fade, then our track will have a nice little fade around the edge, right? Or could have a nice little bevel around the outside of it. If the bevel is 50% transparent, then the fill can change the color of it, which I think is happening on this one, though it's a little hard to tell. But the edges here are kind of a brighter blue than they are over here, right? Because the fill comes in behind it and makes it brighter,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
So there we go. Now we're getting closer to like a nice reactive knob, a knob that's doing some things. Um, but we might want to do some more like effects, drop shadow type stuff. What if I want, most UIs have this look where it's being lit from somewhere. So you have a drop shadow or part of the knob is darker. And you realize pretty quickly, oh yeah, I can't do that with just one of these because it rotates. I need it to rotate. So I need a shadow that's not going to rotate, right? So for that we use, that's what this third column is, right? So here we'll use a simple one to really show it. We're calling these highlights. So highlights would be any part of the knob that shines a little bit, and these are all going to be semi-transparent in most cases. Any part of the knob that has a shadow, maybe gets a little darker on it. In my case, let's just do this funny one with the red and see what it does. Copy as SVG. And that is highlights. Reload. Okay, there's our red highlight down at the bottom. And you can see it overlays, right? It's over top of everything else.
Mm-hmm.
I can show you the code for that. Yeah, draw knob itself, draw highlights and shadows. So code just says same thing. It's back to this stack of drawables that we loaded. If there's a drawable that exists for highlighting, I'm going to take it and, well, we'll talk about this. This is the magic part. But same thing, a fine transform. Well, okay, hey, we can skip that. This is all the magic. Forget about that stuff for a minute. And all we need to do is image, draw within, blah, 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 blah. In this case, I'm telling it, fill the destination and keep it centered, which will automatically resize it, right? So it's taken that thing, it's resized it to the appropriate size, and it draws it, puts it down in the bottom. The magic part that I was referencing was this thing that I showed you earlier, where when we move it around, you notice the red is always it's a shadow. It's on the opposite side of the knob from kind of top center of the monitor.
Mm.
You can see it moving there.
Yeah.
That's accomplished again with another one of these affine transforms, right? The math is a little trickier on this one. We're going to figure out where the monitor top is. In this case, we use um, JUCE has a great function just called get parent monitor area. I'm going to go get top left, put it in float, right? What's the width? Width over 2, monitor top, add XY. Yep. So this is, okay, so I'm going to find a point. I take the monitor top. In this case, I'm just going to do the top left and then add half the width of the monitor, right? There might be more succinct ways to do that, but that's a pretty easy, quick way.
Mhm.
I am then going to find my slider position on the monitor, which is what get screen bounds does. So get screen bounds tells me on the screen, this component is at this many over and this many down. And it gives me a rectangle it gives me a rectangle. I say, give me the center of that rectangle. And then this is a little geometry function. Again, these are all just JUCE functions, not things that I, wrote. Get angle to the point, does some nice math for me and tells me the angle between the top middle and the center of my component, right?
Yep.
And then I use that angle to rotate the SVG, and that's how you get the shadow to move.
That's cool.
Not bad, right?
Really cool that that there's a handy juice method for that.
I know. They got all kinds of stuff, man. Every time I roll my own of some nice function and I'm real proud of it, and I'm like, yeah, I did a bunch of math. I used my college degree, and then I look into the JUCE code and I'm like, oh, they already had one. I could have just done it this way.
Yeah, pretty
that's
awesome.
that's a that's a lesson that I feel like I'm relearning, here and there. But for new people, like it's very handy to keep in mind. Like first thing you should do is go look and a lot of times you won't know the name, right? So you don't know what an affine transform is until you know. And then you're like, oh, that's for doing that.
Mhm.
But the forum's pretty good. There's a lot of newbies on there asking like, hey, how do I do whatever? And someone's like, here's a class for that.
Mhm. Mhm.
So always check that stuff first. But essentially, it's the same process as we did for the rotating knob. It's just here we're taking the shadows and rotating that based on something else, right? And then this one I can load and show you if you want. Maybe we go back to the final fully embellished one. But what happened, what I realized after I did these shadows and things is that, yeah, but I don't always want things to be affected by the shadows in the same way. For example, this particular knob, we have this big bright light, right? And maybe when I come down there, I want that to be on top of the shadow, right? Like casting its own light. The thumbnail, as it moves around, you can imagine has a little LED behind it. So you want that to stay bright, even if it moves into a shadowed region, right? And so to do that, we just do a final SVG where we have the parts that we want to be highlighting, the parts that are going to be light or dark, but will also move with the knob.
Got it.
Sorry about the beeps. And that's it. That's our fourth layer, and we get to a place where we can draft all kinds of fun knobs, and as you see, do it very quickly. Where we can then say, oh, okay, I want to use this knob, but then put this shadowing on it, and how's that going to look?
Mhm.
So we can walk through a few more examples of that. Try some fun stuff. I can get this back to the nice looking knob, so we can go ooh, or we can kind of call it a day. Just depends what sort of questions you had or where else we might want to take this.
Well, I think you've covered everything, but yeah, let's see one or two more examples of you just switching that up just so people can see the workflow and see how it works.
Yeah, I'll show you this one because this knob is a little interesting because it has a copy paste, copy SVG. It has a transparent right there. So this one makes use of that thing in the background that we already did a little bit. Knob. Okay, so that'll be my knob. Let's put a funny green track on it.
You love that green color in your
Do I use this pretty nice looking? Where's that one down here? Highlights. Copy SVG. Highlights. And then let's come down to just put this. So this is this will be a bright shine, which will probably end up right about here. But it will be on top of the shadows if it all works. This last one's kind of tricky because what they end up doing, see how this is on a bigger palette than the image, than the little images in there. When it exports, I'm still trying to figure this out, but when Figma, no, I think it's not Figma. When Juice imports or when Figma exports, one or the other, if it doesn't see anything out here, it makes the canvas a lot smaller. So then you have to get the affine transforms again. You have to realize that, oh, this thing's really small. I actually need to resize it and then put it in the middle and here and then rotate it this way. So you end up having to do this a little bit of geometry math, more or less. But we'll see if it works or if it crashes spectacularly. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, funny green track. But you notice the middle part of the knob, brightens up as you move because of what we're drawing behind there. And it looks pretty good. The central part of it does. Just the green knob looks weird, of course, or the green track. So then we'll say, no, 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 that looks goofy. Client didn't like it. Let's try a more standard track. That here. You know what else we could look at quickly? Well, no, hang on, I'll tell you in a minute. Reload. Give me a better track. There we go. More standard. That looks more semi-professional.
Hmm.
The shines are really quite nice. I mean, that's what's nice about Figma or just SVGs in general, any SVG editor, that you don't if I were to draw this programmatically, write the code for all of it, it'd
Right.
be a whole lot of like, okay, set gradient with here to here, and then draw this, you know, uh, fill this circle, fill this ellipse, draw this ellipse, and it would be a lot of code.
Mhm.
So you skip a lot of code by doing this kind of stuff.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's a lot more efficient as well, right?
Yeah, but it's not, I mean, it's efficient in terms of my time. It's not, I don't think it's more efficient in terms of like CPU cycles, whether you're reading an SVG and rendering it or programmatically doing it. And there is some difference between like if you have the image strip where I have 200 images on this long strip and I'm going to render one of those images depending on the relative position of the knob. That ends up taking a little more CPU, but it even today it's like, it hardly matters because CPU, our computers are so powerful. Like
Mhm.
that in itself is not a reason I don't think to choose SVGs over images necessarily.
Got it. Looks really,
Yeah.
yeah.
The other thing to note, and I don't think we need to walk through the whole process, but this is now looking at things that are on my desktop. When I get to like, okay, I really like that one. The thing you do, of course, is put it in the binary data blob, which either if it's in the producer, your project, you just drag it in there and it'll generate it automatically. If you're using CMake, then I think there's a helper function for that sort of thing. But then this ends up instead of being in files, it gets baked into the code itself, and it can be hard loaded. And I can show you. I mean, like I said, we don't need to go through it, but
Yeah.
that's what this is, right? Where now I have them, they're saved as a string somewhere in my binary data. So I just set them,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So once you get to like releasing the product, that's what you want to do.
Yeah. That's actually one of the one of the few things that's actually easier in CMake than it is in the producer to get your binary data into Juice.
You just point it to like a directory or something in CMake, right? It's like add binary. Psh, here's my directory.
Yeah, there's something in the JUCE CMake API that does that. I can't remember exactly, but yeah, it's basically just a CMake command and that's it.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty easy in the Pro Juicer now too. I mean, you put it in there and then it like automatically shows up in the binary data.
Right, but you got to use the command line utility for that, right?
No, 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 no. That's long gone.
Really? Okay, I didn't
Yeah,
know.
there was a binary builder back in the day. Now you just drag and drop, just drop it into the Pro Juicer.
I didn't know that.
I think it's even smart enough. I haven't looked into this, right? Like I don't know when it knows to make it one versus the other. Like if you put an XML file in there, does it know to, it clearly does. It knows to that, oh, it's an XML. I want to put this in the binary data. And it does the same with like fonts and images and like all that stuff. Uh, but I wonder, like, if you just dropped a text file in there, I think it would assume it was part of the code, and it would leave it in there, like in the Xcode project, not in the binary data. But I could be wrong.
Yeah. Wow, I didn't know you could just drag it onto the producer like that. I've been using the command line utility this entire.
Doing it the hard way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um. Yeah. Where do I have it? Files, resources. Like, yeah, just put stuff in here, and it automatically shows up in the binary data.
Cool.
There's the SVGs.
That's really awesome.
Yeah.
All right. I missed the project.
Oh.
I was
Oh, I renamed them. I'm gonna have to change the. I'm gonna have to change these now. Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, like I said, man, quick, easy video. I think I was really excited when a client had asked me to look at Figma, and I was like, oh, I might be able to use this. And like inside of a day, I had some, working reskinnable knobs to play with.
yeah.
Uh,
So your thing
and
though, you know so much about graphics, paths, drawables.
oh, tell me more. Tell me more. Yeah, I tend to live on the UI side of stuff. It's true.
Yeah.
Do a lot of this.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think this is a good time to wrap up. If you have for anybody that's watching this video, if you have questions, please put them down in the comments and we'll take a look at them, see if we can answer them. Also, you can join our community on the audioprogrammer.com/community to join our Discord group. Aaron is in there under Stagecraft. Is it Stagecraft or
I think
Stagecraft?
it's Aaron at Stagecraft actually, but yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm in there every once in a while. I also have my own Discord server for Stagecraft software because it's a great place to do outreach to users and all that kind of stuff.
sweet. Yeah. So join them both. In the meantime, happy coding and thank you for joining and see you next time.